The sun was just beginning to rise over the small village of Umuchigo, casting a golden glow on the rooftops. Nica wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carried a heavy tray of roasted corn to the roadside stall. The air smelled of burning wood, fresh bread from the nearby bakery, and the early morning dew. She had been awake since before dawn, preparing food to sell. Her body ached, and her feet were swollen from standing for too long, but she did not complain. She had a reason to keep pushing, a reason to endure every hardship. Her only son, Abuka. He was her pride, her joy, the one thing in this world that made all her struggles worth it. "Good morning, Mama." "Abuka?" called out Ijoma, her neighbor, as she passed by. "You're up early again." Nica forced a smile. "Money doesn't wait for anyone, my sister." But deep inside, she was tired, not just physically, but in her soul. She had worked hard all her life, selling food by the roadside, washing clothes for rich families, and doing anything to put food on the table. All for Abuka. She had promised herself that he would never suffer the way she did. He was brilliant, always coming home with the highest scores in school. If she had to break her back to send him to university, she would. That morning, as she prepared for another long day, she whispered to herself, "One day, my son will make it. One day, I will rest." The sun was already high in the sky when Nica finally took a moment to sit down. Her hands were stained with the dust of the marketplace, her wrapper damp with sweat. But the sight of her little stall filled her with pride. This was how she survived, how she fed Abuka, how she paid his school fees. She reached into the small wooden box where she kept her earnings and counted the crumpled Nara notes. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to buy food for the week and save a little for Abuka's university dream. Abuka ran up to her, his school bag bouncing on his back. "Mama, I got the highest score in mathematics again," he said, his eyes shining with excitement. Neka's heart swelled with pride. She pulled him close and kissed his forehead. "My son, you will be great one day. You will not sell food on the roadside like me. You will wear fine clothes, live in a big house, and drive a car. You will make me proud." Abuka hugged her tightly. "Mama, when I become a big man, I will take care of you. You will never have to work again." Tears filled Neka's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She smiled and cupped his face. "I know, my son, but for now, let me take care of you." That night, when Abuka was asleep, Nica sat in the dim light of their small home, staring at his school books. She had never gone to school. She couldn't even read, but her son, he would be different. He would have everything she never had. And so, she made a decision. Even if it meant going hungry, even if it meant suffering, she would do everything in her power to make sure he succeeded. She whispered to herself, "Whatever it takes." Nica woke up before dawn, as she did every day. The sky was still dark, the village silent except for the distant sound of crickets. She tiptoed past Abuka, who was still asleep on their small mattress, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. She smiled, brushing a gentle hand over his forehead. He was the reason she woke up before the sun and returned home long after it had set. She hurried to the market, setting up her small stall before the morning rush began. The air smelled of fresh bread, roasted plantains, and frying akara. She called out to passers-by, waving them over with the warmest smile she could manage, despite the exhaustion in her bones. By midday, she had sold most of her goods, but just as she was packing up, a man in a fine suit approached her. His eyes were sharp, his presence commanding. "You are Mama Abuka, right?" he asked. Nica wiped her hands on her wrapper and nodded cautiously. "Yes, sir." The man gave a small smile. "I am Abuka's school principal. I have good news and bad news." Nika's heart pounded. "What is it?" The good news is that your son has been awarded a place in the best university in the country, the principal said. His scores are among the highest we have ever seen. Nica gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. Praise be to God. My son will go to university. Then, the principal's face darkened. But there is a problem. The scholarship does not cover all the fees. He needs money for accommodation, books, and food. If these expenses are not covered in time, he will lose his place. Neca's heart, which had soared moments ago, crashed back down. How much? She whispered. The number he mentioned made her legs weak. It was more than she had ever held in her hands, more than she could ever make in years of selling corn in Akara. She gripped the edge of her stall, willing herself not to cry. I will find the money, she said firmly. I don't know how, but I will. The principal nodded, pity in his eyes. You have a good son, Mama Abuka. Don't let this chance slip away. As he walked away, Nica felt the weight of the world press down on her shoulders. She looked up at the sky and whispered, God help me. I have come too far to fail now. Nica barely slept that night. She lay awake, staring at the wooden ceiling of their small house, thinking of only one thing: how to find the money for Abuka's university. The next morning, she gathered every naira she had saved. It was not even close to enough. She thought of borrowing, but who would lend such a large amount to a poor food seller? She thought of begging, but pride held her back. By midday, she made a decision. She wrapped her only expensive wrapper, the one she had kept for special occasions, and walked to the wealthiest part of town. She had washed clothes for rich families before. Perhaps someone would be kind enough to lend her money. At the first house, they turned her away. At the second, they laughed. At the third, the madam of the house shook her head. Nica, nobody gives money for free. If you want this much, you must be ready to do anything. Nica's stomach twisted. She knew what the woman meant. She clenched her fists. I will find another way. She walked home, her feet aching, her heart heavy. But as she stepped inside, she saw Abuka sitting at the table, his eyes shining with excitement as he read a book. Her son had a future. He had a chance. And so, Nica made the ultimate sacrifice. That night, she returned to the wealthy woman's house. She did what she had to do. And the next morning, she held the money in her hands, the price of a mother's love. Nica clutched the bundle of money tightly as she walked home, her steps heavy with shame. She had done what no mother should have to do. But as she stepped into their small house and saw Abuka sleeping peacefully, she reminded herself, this was for him. The next morning, she handed over the money to the school. The principal looked surprised. You got it so soon? Nica forced a smile. A mother will do anything for her child. That evening, when Abuka returned home, he found her sitting outside, staring at the setting sun. He rushed to her, excitement dancing in his eyes. Mama, they said I can start university. You made it happen. Tears welled in her eyes. She pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly. My son, you must promise me something. Abuka frowned. What is it, Mama? She cupped his face. No matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, never forget the woman who gave you everything. Abuka smiled. I will never forget you, Mama. One day, I will take care of you. You will rest. I promise. Nica smiled, but deep inside, she knew. Some sacrifices are never repaid. The day Abuka left for university was filled with both joy and sorrow. The entire village came to celebrate him, the boy who had beaten all odds. Mothers pointed at him and told their children, work hard like Abuka. Father shook Nica's hand and said, you have raised a great son. But as she smiled at the crowd, her heart was breaking. Abuka hugged her tightly before boarding the bus. Mama, I will make you proud. One day, I will take you out of this place." She held on to him for a moment, then let go. "Go, my son. Chase your dreams." The bus drove away, and for the first time in years, Nica felt truly alone. She returned to her stall the next day, but something had changed. The weight of what she had sacrificed pressed on her. The money was gone. The shame remained. But none of it mattered. As long as Abuka succeeded, she whispered to herself, "My son will never suffer like me." Abuka's life at university was everything he had dreamed of. The tall buildings, the bright lights, the endless possibilities. It was nothing like the small village he had left behind. At first, he called Nica every day. "Mama, I joined a study group. Mama, I got the highest score in my class. Mama, I miss your food." Each call filled Nica with pride. She worked even harder at her stall, sending him money whenever he needed. Even if she had nothing left for herself, Abuka would never lack. But as the months passed, the calls became less frequent. First, every week, then every 2 weeks, then only when he needed something. "Mama, I need money for books." "Mama, there's an important seminar I must attend." "Mama, I promise I will pay you back one day." And every time, without question, Nica found a way to send him what he needed. But one night, she sat alone in their small house, staring at the silent phone. It had been 3 months since Abuka last called just to ask how she was. She sighed, whispering, "Maybe he is just busy. He will remember me when he succeeds." But deep in her heart, a mother knows. Her son was slipping away. The days turned into months, and the months into years. Abuka was no longer the boy who once promised to take care of his mother. He had graduated with honors, secured a high-paying job in the city, and surrounded himself with important people. His suits were sharp, his car was sleek, and his home was nothing like the small village house he grew up in. But in all his success, he forgot the woman who made it possible. Nica still sat by her stall every day, her body weaker than before. She had given everything, her money, her strength, even her dignity, to see her son rise. And yet, he never came back. She would call him sometimes, her voice hopeful. "My son, how are you?" "I'm fine, Mama. I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back." But the call never came. On special occasions, she would sit outside, watching the road, hoping to see him return, hoping to hear him say, "Mama, I have come for you." But he never did. And slowly, Nica began to fade. Nica's body grew weaker with each passing day. The years of sacrifice, hunger, and hard labor had taken their toll. Her once strong hands trembled, her eyesight blurred, and the fire in her spirit slowly dimmed. Yet, she never stopped waiting. Every evening, she would sit outside, staring at the road, whispering to herself, "Abuka will come. He has not forgotten me." But the truth was, he had. Abuka had built a new life, far away from the village, far away from the past. His mother's struggles were nothing but a distant memory. He never visited. He never sent money. He never even asked if she had eaten. One evening, the village chief's wife found Nica sitting by her stall, too weak to stand. "Mama Abuka, you must go to the hospital," she urged. But Nica only smiled faintly. "No need. I'm only waiting for my son." That night, as she lay on her old mattress, her frail body shivering, she whispered, "Abuka, my son, I kept my promise. I gave you everything." Her voice was so soft that only the wind heard her final words. By morning, Nica was gone. Abuka was in his office when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It was a number from the village. He almost ignored it, but something inside him told him to answer. "Hello?" A heavy silence. Then a voice, quiet and sorrowful. "Abuka, your mother is dead." The words hit him like a thunderbolt. His breath caught in his throat. His hands trembled. "What?" he whispered. The elder on the phone sighed. She waited for you, Abuka. She sat by the road every day, hoping you would come back. She never stopped talking about you, but you never came. Ibuka's heart clenched. His mother had died waiting for him. He shot up from his chair. I'll come home. But deep inside he knew. It was too late. She was already gone. For the first time in years, tears filled his eyes. The mother he had forgotten had never forgotten him. And now, he would never get the chance to say, "I'm sorry." Abuka arrived in the village the next morning. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The air felt heavy, suffocating. He had come back, but too late. The villagers barely looked at him. Their faces held quiet disappointment. They had seen Nica suffer. They had watched her wait for a son who never returned. Inside the small house, Madame Uju, the village chief's wife, handed him a small, crumpled envelope. "Your mother left this for you," she said quietly. With trembling hands, Abuka opened it. The paper was old, the handwriting shaky. Her last words to him, "My dearest son, I am so proud of you. Even though I have not seen you in a long time, I know you have become the man I always dreamed you would be. I hope you are happy. I hope you eat well and sleep in a comfortable bed. I hope your shoes are new and your clothes are fine. I hope you have everything I could never give you when you were a child. I am sorry. I could not give you more, my son. I tried. I gave all that I had. I only wanted you to fly. But my son, you forgot me. I waited for you every day. I told myself you would come. Even when my bones ached and my eyes grew weak, I still sat by the road, hoping to hear your voice call me Mama one more time. But you never came. I do not blame you. Life is busy. Dreams take time. But I just want you to know, I loved you with everything I had. I have no regrets, my son. My only wish was to see you one last time. But if you read this, then I know you have come home. And that is enough. Be happy, Abuka. Live well. And please, do not let your own children forget you the way you forgot me." "Mama?" Abuka's hand shook. Tears poured from his eyes. His chest ached, but no amount of pain could bring her back. He had promised to take care of her, but when that day finally came, she was already gone. And now, all he had left was her letter, the letter that would haunt him forever. Abuka stood by his mother's grave, the letter clutched in his hands. The villagers had gathered for the burial, whispering among themselves. Some shook their heads, others sighed, but no one said anything to him. They didn't need to. His guilt was punishment enough. As they lowered Nica's body into the ground, Abuka fell to his knees. "Mama, I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have come back. I should have remembered you." But the wind carried away his words, just like time had carried away the mother who had once given him everything. Days after the burial, Abuka walked through the small house where he had grown up. Everything was the same, except she was no longer there. Her worn-out slippers still sat by the door. The cooking pot she used every day was still in the corner. The small stool she sat on, waiting for him, still faced the road. She had died in the same poverty she fought to save him from. His chest tightened. All the money, all the success, none of it mattered anymore. Before leaving the village, he gathered the children of the town. He told them his mother's story. He warned them, no matter how far you go, never forget the ones who sacrificed for you. He set up a foundation in Nica's name to support struggling mothers. It would never bring her back, but it was the only way he could honor her memory. As he drove away, he whispered, "Rest now, Mama. I will never forget you again." But deep in his heart, he knew some regrets never fade. The end. Never forget the people who sacrificed for you. Success is nothing if you lose the ones who made it possible. A mother's love is priceless. No wealth can replace it once it's gone. Don't wait until it's too late to show gratitude. Love people while they are still here.